Calling from a 925 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yo, this is Marco from the Discord chat.
Oh, okay. Marco from the Discord.
TMBS Discord.
What can...
TMBS
Yeah, I'm a
Discord.
TMBS.
I was actually
Discord.
thinking today, like,
Michael Brooks
have
Show
a,
Discord.
We should get a ding every time.
Ding.
TMBS. Michael does
I
it.
like
come
that.
With, it would be funny
Ding. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So,
Yes, calling on the Majority Report phone system. Yes, Michael. What
From
can I
the
do for you?
Michael Brooks Discord on the
Yeah.
Majority
What can we
Report
do for
phone
you?
system.
Yes.
I'm actually even calling with a very TMBS topic today.
Oh,
I'm
all right.
you just
In that
call
case,
tonight?
click.
Syria.
Yes.
Just call tonight.
So I'm actually calling because I just wanted to talk about some of the positions that have been taken recently with the new airstrikes against Assad's chemical, factories or whatever. So, you know, like after listening to like Struggle Session and a few other left podcasts that have talked about it, I'm like really becoming confused as to what the left thinks is happening in Syria and what ultimately people want as like outcome.
I think the left is a little confused about it.
I don't think there's a left position.
I'm sorry?
There isn't
I
a
think
left.
a lot of leftists are pretty confused about what to think about it because it is pretty confusing.
Yeah, like for example, on the Struggle Session podcast, and this is a very common theme I hear, like from Kyle Kalinske, like in the progressive camp, two more far left people keep repeating that all of the rebels and the people we're supporting in Syria are jihadists and extremists. But we haven't been really supporting those groups. We canceled that program as soon as Trump came in, basically. And our primary horse we've been backing there is the SDF. So when people talk about like abandoning Syria altogether and just leaving, you're literally talking about leaving the Kurds to whatever may come after we have encouraged these people to go and do what they've done to put themselves in this precarious position in the first damn place.
Right.
So the Kurds, all on their own, for the most part, had managed to liberate their own areas and establish some level of de facto autonomy. But we're the ones who coaxed them out and to go attack places like Raqqa that had nothing to do with them and had them go and fight to liberate other Arabs from other Arabs, right? Like liberate either Shias from Sunnis or Sunnis from Shias. And in the process of doing that, the U.S. kind of really forced the YPG and the Kurdish elements to start accepting more Arab political control, more Arab coalitions, because the U.S., you know, obviously envisioned for them to eventually, I mean, I'm assuming to take on Assad, because why else would you start to try to create a political project that goes outside of the Kurdish boundaries? And
well, I think it was Assad, but I think it was also, it might have been more narrowly targeted on ISIS, to be honest with you, in terms of our agenda. I mean, I think there is. I think it has changed. I think it has changed over time, because I think, frankly, the U.S. policy in this, over the course of the 9 years that this has been going on, has changed with what the perceived political will was, and also with the facts on the ground. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you could not have done. Now, I'm not saying Donald Trump did anything that had any meaning. In fact, of all of the options as to what to do, sort of doing a pretend dropping of bombs and pretending that it was doing something, and then everybody walking away saving face with no civilian casualties, I feel like, is a decent case scenario, frankly. I would rather there not have been dropping of bombs, but if it's going to happen, I prefer like one where everybody walks away thinking we won and nobody dies. That's a pretty good one. But I think you could not have done that. Obama could not have done that 5 years ago because the situation was too volatile. Now Assad has clearly won the civil war, and all that's left is to protect those Kurds. And I think that that can be done with with hopefully as minimal military involvement as possible and some type of negotiated acceptance by the United States that Assad is in power. And in return, you protect at least some of the territory that has been the territorial integrity of the Kurds and provide for some measure of autonomy. I mean, that to me seems like
the problem is that's incompatible with quote unquote get the hell out of Syria. Right, like
I don't think there's a lot of nuance I don't think there's a lot of nuance in the takes of a lot of people here who have spent, and I'm not saying anybody specifically. There's been people who have spent their time basically saying, depicting Assad as some type of like a victim of, crisis actors. And I mean, I don't think Assad is a victim of imperialism, not at this point. I mean, to the extent that he's been a Russian client state for, 50 years, I guess. I don't know.
Well, his dad ran it before.
Exactly.
But I mean, I think also, though, that it's important to say that there's, 2 points. One is that, we go over this a lot. Some people find it necessary. They can't just make all of the true statements, which is that U.S. intervention in the beginning and generally, besides preserving some protection with the Kurds, is a very bad idea, that we supported through the Gulf states all these jihadist groups and horrible actors. That's all true. And Assad's a butcher who's vastly disproportionately sort of culpable for most of the violence there. Like, this is all correct, and some people seem to feel that you need to have like some counter-narrative fantasy about him in order to be anti-interventionist, which I just don't agree with. But I think the other really important thing coming out of this, though, is that even if you look at somebody like Patrick Coburn, who I might not always see this, he probably looks at it a little bit more from the kind of Assad lens that I do, but he's there and he's an incredibly good reporter. And, he's basically saying like, and I don't know if this is possible, but like, Assad's going to say, but he needs to release political prisoners and they need to stop engaging in violence and the Kurds need to have some protection. Like and the refugees, much more needs to be done for refugees. There's actually, in terms of substance, I think what's funny is I think there is actually a left position. It's just that everybody's fighting on all these relative margins and conspiracy theories versus like it's become a stand-in and a proxy for other arguments.
Yeah, it's become like a signifier in some way, exactly. And it's sort of like in the way that guns, God, and whatnot are, and the deficit on the right, have become these sort of like tribal identifiers. In this instance, it's like. There's some argument that that the only legit anti-war position is that the white helmets are Al Qaeda and Assad is like some type of victim, and it's absurd, frankly, and also I will also say this: it's a stupid argument that is way too narrow in terms of an ideological one, because what if Assad is a bad guy? Like if your argument is premised on the idea that Assad's not so bad, or that the white helmets are fake, or that he is or is not using chemical weapons. I mean, we
accept all those realities and don't want to intervene in Syria.
Yes, but the problem is like if you are hinging your argument on
right. Well, look at Venezuela. It's a much more gentle case. I happen to think it's pretty objective that Maduro has failed, right? But the CIA and the Trump administration needs to stop destabilizing the Venezuelan government. That's our primary obligation.
I would also expand this to the Russian argument. If your argument is that we shouldn't have World War III with Russia because they didn't interfere with our elections, well, that's a real problem, because what if they did? And so you don't.
I still say no World War III.
Yeah, you've got to base these arguments on a broader premise that is less about trying to prove facts that, frankly, none of the people who are engaged in these arguments are really in a position to prove one way or another.
It's like the way, why would Assad do this at this time? Trying to play psychology of that. It's just a waste of time.
Exactly.
And I have to say, in general, why would he? But I trust Juan Cole's speculation on why he would more than your average.
He was
person
closing
on
the
Twitter.
deal.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And it totally worked. And he had actually faced no actual consequences.
It totally worked.
So 2 points. 2 points to close on that was the kind of the purpose of my call. One, I would say to these kinds of elements of the left that like to use like interventionism and anti-interventionism when it's convenient for them as a political point, Muslims are not your talking point. Over 1 million Iraqis have died as a result of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of Syrians have died. I mean, in the course of the last 2-3 decades, millions of people have died just in the Middle East, North Africa region due to U.S. actions alone. I think sometimes people take a step back and look at themselves like we are a psychotic, crazy society that's just like rampaging across. I mean, we'd make Genghis Khan blush with some of the stuff that we do, but we don't really see it that way because it's our own country. So we're sitting here like, I don't know what, like trying to play like relativism, even in instances like people on the left do it where they're like, oh, it's like literally in this Struggle Session podcast, it's like, oh, Saddam may have been terrible, but he kept that place together. It's like, yeah, tell that to the Kurds who are getting gassed and having a slow genocide committed against them, that they would have preferred that.
And I never understand that. If you accept
like,
that logic,
nakedly not giving a shit about Middle Easterns, it's just a convenient talking point when you need to hammer a Democrat or you need to hammer a Republican.
And if you accept that logic, support
that doesn't
Kissinger.
make interventionism good.
Do you trust the Trump administration to intervene in any sort of humanitarian way in this conflict, though?
Fuck no, but it already happened, and they're there now, and the Kurds are depending on U.S. to keep them alive. And you can't distance yourself from that fucking reality.
Don't
you know what I mean?
pull away the support for the Kurds.
I don't care about the fact that Trump is there or whoever. The point is that the only thing keeping these people from going back into mass prisons and being tortured and strangled day and night in prisons, like they were before this whole thing happened, which is like the Assad regime's intelligence agency was notorious across the Middle East as one of the most efficient in snatching up any dissident or anybody who had anything to say about anything, which mostly ended up being Sunni Arabs and Kurds, getting stuck in prison and never being seen again, right? And this is like, if that's killing a few thousand people a year over the course of a decade, 2 decades, I mean, you're killing a shitload of people. It's like these people's lives were completely miserable. And I'm not saying I'm for intervention by Trump. I'm not saying we should trust this guy to go save the world. But the position, taking the position of like absolute anti-interventionism in all instances, even to the point where you're literally ready to allow the Kurds to be basically just obliterated, just so you can maintain the idea that we shouldn't be anywhere. And a lot of times the talking points for these things are, oh, how many American troops are getting killed, how much it's costing America, not about the lives of Muslims, not about how much it's destroying them or how many, like it's much less often mentioned that over 1 million Iraqis died than 5,000 U.S. troops died. Well, right? And the point of the reason why that's the problem is that if we ever win, if we ever get power, we're going to need to be intervening. Okay, we're going to attract the ire of global capital. And the whole point is we're supposed to support the working class globally everywhere in all their struggles. Because if you try to just sit there in your own borders and pretend like you're going to have your own peaceful socialist society, and nobody's going to come agitate and fuck with you, and your own elites aren't going to flee to other places and then from there try to agitate your society.
Yes,
I mean, you're stupid.
I'm really glad you brought up.
You don't realize that by now.
I'm glad you brought up the class issues involved because I wanted to ask you about that. I've seen some reports from journalists like Rania Khalek saying that the sort of ruling class of Syria, a lot of them are living in exile in the U.S. right now and are building political support for a certain kind of regime change. Where do you come down on that?
So, I mean, this is like the same as when the Cubans left and then sat there in America and have been agitating for embargoes and sanctions for decades now, like immiserating their own people back home. This is the same as like when I was on the Hill, I would go a lot of times to like, these think tank meetings and whatever. And one of them I went to was like the Iranian American community that's like in favor of interventionism, right? So they had like a bunch of Republicans there giving little keynote speeches. And they're literally like, these Persians are going up giving speeches trying to convince the American Congress to go invade and kill people in their own country so they can go back and seize properties that they lost during the revolution when they were the elites under the Shah. So I'm very, very skeptical anytime that there's like some sort of diaspora that fled some kind of political event in America asking them to go and invade another country to change some kind of, because it's never really.
That's true, but like there's also certainly a class structure inside
Persians
Syria.
In America who want to bring back the Shah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Listen.
So where do you people want to bring back a monarchy?
So where do you come down then on what we should do about changing the regime.
Well, I think he's saying no regime change, but you got to protect those people who we have coaxed into our service and the service of fighting ISIS, and who are who would otherwise be subject to some form of genocide, right? I mean,
that sounds
this is not. There's a difference.
This can actually go. Sorry, let me just cut you off. There's only two ways this can actually go realistically if we don't opt to just leave the Kurds alone. If we actually decide long term we're going to sit there and we're going to protect, and at this point it's wrong actually to say the Kurds. It's actually the SDF, which includes Sunni Arabs as well, who are actually probably were more oppressed before this war started, was the Sunni Arabs than the Kurds, which is why this whole ISIS and everything, not to apologize for ISIS, but a lot of these people had genuine grievances. They were being ethnically cleansed and being imprisoned and tortured.
Okay.
But so a lot of it is also Sunni Arabs and Kurds, right? So there is no solution for the Kurds that doesn't include Sunni Arabs. And at this point, that's a population majority in Syria, which Assad will simply not allow. So he's either going to demand that the Kurds compromise on the Sunni Arabs, which is not possible at this time to do and maintain the SDF because of how much of it is Sunni Arabs, and you'll just instigate another civil war immediately, and it'll most likely cause a lot of those Sunni Arabs to drift over to Turkish backing because Turkey's looking for any way to keep the Kurds and the SDF from staying together. So that's kind of like, there's two ways this can go about. Either we're going to commit to long-term putting there and putting a lot more troops there, but not necessarily do regime change, and we're going to basically just guarantee that SDF becomes de facto its own country in the regions where the Sunni Arabs and the Kurds have aligned. Or we have to commit to regime change, getting rid of Assad and trying to bring about a new government in which there's a Sunni and Kurdish coalition that governs. There's no really other option here. There's no option where we're like, let's get these two to negotiate. Because as long as they stay in one country, the second we're gone, there's no reason for Syria to live. And if you think it was difficult to get us in the first time without Russia there, but now that Russia's there, they're never going to leave. They're going to sit there in Tartarus, and they're going to maintain direct control and pressure on Assad. And, next time getting in will be impossible. So once they're empowered in that way, I mean, that's just, I think, in my opinion, that's magical thinking. I think that you're going to leave
we got to wrap this up. We got to wrap
Short.
this up. I'm sorry.
I just want to know if there's any way that we can materially support the Kurds in Rojava.
Well, he just said that there's two options as far as he's concerned. And I gotta wrap it up. I mean, is there
what can I do if I want to donate money to them?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess you'd have to donate to. In my opinion, what would be smart is just to donate to organizations that are here and that are in Europe, trying to do public outreach and to inform public here. That's an immense actually benefit to the Kurds. I mean, they have one of the biggest PR projects as far as a foreign lobby goes, and they spend a lot of money in the United States government and in American media to improve their image.
Got to go. Appreciate the call. Interesting stuff. I mean, I think there are other options that have as equal chance of being effective. I just don't. It may be the case there's only two options. One is regime change, or two, some type of way in which you maintain troop presence there as some type of. But I think maybe there's ways of getting, of negotiating a peacekeeping force in there. But I don't see, I just don't see how that is sustainable in the long run and it being effective. I don't have any reason to believe that we have the ability to go in there and engage in regime change. That ship has sailed, as far as I can tell. All right,
my heart goes out to everyone fighting Rojava right now. It's as a leftist, it's really important that we support our international comrades, and what they're doing there is really cool.